I grew up in a quiet town outside of Astoria, Oregon. The kind of place where everyone waves when you drive past and nothing ever really happens. When I was 23, I bought a small fixer-upper about an hour inland. It was cheap because it needed work, but it had land, privacy, and most importantly, it was mine. Like a lot of first-time homeowners, I couldn't afford to furnish it with brand new stuff, so I relied heavily on online marketplaces, garage sales, and whatever friends or family were getting rid of. One evening, I came across a listing that immediately stood out. The photos showed high-end furniture, a leather recliner, a solid wood dining table, a huge flat-screen TV, even some expensive-looking lamps, all for prices that were way too low. It was basically a whole house worth of stuff being sold off at once. The description was short and said the seller was moving suddenly and needed everything gone quickly. I messaged the seller, expecting either no response or some kind of scam. Instead, I got a reply almost immediately. The guy was polite but very brief, answering only what I asked and nothing more. He didn't haggle at all, which was unusual, and said I could come pick things up that same night if I wanted. He sent an address and told me to just knock on the door when I arrived. The address was deep in a rural area, out past where streetlights stopped and mailboxes were few and far between. I figured it was just someone with a big property. I had a pickup truck, so I wasn't worried about hauling anything. By the time I got close, the sun was setting, turning everything that deep orange color that makes the woods look darker than they actually are. The GPS took me down a long, narrow road with trees crowding both sides. There were no houses visible from the road, just occasional driveways disappearing into the forest. Finally, it told me to turn onto one of those driveways. It was gravel, uneven, and wound uphill for what felt like forever. I almost thought I had the wrong place until the trees suddenly opened into a huge clearing. In the center sat a large two-story house. It wasn't run down or abandoned looking. In fact, it looked expensive, like something out of a magazine, with tall windows and a wide wraparound porch. But there were no lights on inside, even though it was getting dark. I walked up to the front door and knocked. The sound echoed through the house, hollow and loud, but nothing happened. I waited, knocked again, then tried the doorbell. No chime, no sound, nothing. I checked my phone to see if the seller had messaged me. Nothing new. I sent a quick "I'm here" text and waited. Still nothing. I was about to leave when I noticed something on the porch floor near the door. A small handwritten note taped down so it wouldn't blow away. It said, "Back door, come around." That gave me a weird feeling. Most people would just come to the door, especially if they knew you were arriving. But I'd already driven all that way, so I told myself not to overthink it. I walked around the side of the house. The grass was long and slightly damp, brushing against my shoes. As I passed the windows, I noticed they were all covered with blinds, not just drawn, tightly shut, no light leaking through anywhere. The backyard opened up behind the house into another clearing that stretched toward a dense wall of trees. A wooden deck ran along the back, and in the center was a sliding glass door, also covered by closed blinds. I stepped onto the deck and knocked on the glass. The sound was dull, absorbed by the blinds behind it. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I checked my phone. My message hadn't even been read. At that point, I was annoyed more than anything. I figured maybe the guy was in the shower or couldn't hear me. There was a patio chair on the deck facing the yard, so I sat down to wait a minute. As I sat there, I couldn't shake the feeling that the place didn't seem lived in. No outdoor clutter, no decorations, no sounds from inside. Just that heavy silence and the faint rustling of trees far away. After a couple minutes, I stood up, deciding I'd give it one last try before leaving. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The blinds on the sliding door weren't fully closed anymore. There was a thin, vertical gap between them, just wide enough for someone to look through. I hadn't heard any movement inside. No footsteps, no shifting, nothing. I stepped closer without really meaning to, peering at the gap. It was too dark inside to see anything clearly, just blackness. Then something pale moved in that darkness. An eye. It was right there, pressed close to the glass, staring straight at me through the narrow opening. I stumbled backwards so fast I nearly fell off the deck. The blinds snapped shut instantly, like someone had pulled them tight again. My heart was pounding. Every instinct was screaming that something was wrong, deeply wrong. I turned to go back around the house, planning to get in my truck and leave immediately. As I stepped off the deck and onto the grass, I glanced up at the second-floor windows. Every single blind up there was now open. And in each window, there was a person standing behind the glass. They weren't moving. They weren't waving or knocking or doing anything normal. They were just standing there, perfectly still, facing outward. Even from that distance, I could see their faces. They were all smiling. Not big, exaggerated smiles, just small, calm smiles, like they were quietly amused. I didn't stick around to study them. I walked fast at first, then broke into a run around the side of the house. As I passed the windows I'd walked by earlier, I saw that those blinds were open too now. More people stood behind them, all facing me, all smiling. I reached the front yard and practically dove into my truck, locking the doors immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I fumbled the keys twice before getting the engine started. As I backed down the driveway, I made the mistake of glancing toward the porch. The front door was open. Someone was standing in the doorway, one hand resting on the frame, watching me leave. They didn't wave. They didn't move. They just stood there until the house disappeared behind the trees. I didn't stop driving until I reached the main road. Later that night, after I'd calmed down enough to think clearly, I messaged the seller asking what the hell that was. The message never delivered. The profile disappeared completely, like it had never existed. The next day, I called the county non-emergency line and reported what happened. A deputy called me back that evening. He said they had checked the property. According to him, the house was supposed to be vacant. The owner was out of state for months. No signs of forced entry, no vehicles, all the doors locked. And every blind in the house was closed.